And we're back with Dr. Yaw for part 2 of our discussion about his many years of service here at County College Morris. Welcome back, Dr. Yaw.
Thank you very much, John.
I guess I'd like to change the scope a little bit and look about CCM in a larger picture, and as far as being an institution in the state. Could you describe a little bit about the funding of CCM, how tuition and how the state and county are involved?
Yes. Well, I think it's probably important to go back to the very beginning, even before I was here, because in 1965 there was enabling legislation that was passed in the legislature that created the authority to establish community colleges in the state, in each of one of the counties. There are 19 now. In two cases, the colleges are shared between 2 counties. So Raritan Valley, for example, is Somerset and Hunterdon County, and Atlantic Cape is Atlantic County and Cape May County. But the funding structure was set up then, and the original funding was that the state would provide 1/2 of the funding for the county colleges. The other half would be split between the local sponsor, meaning the county, and student tuition. And that rapidly disappeared, or at least went much less than 50%. And then there was legislation passed when Dr. Maston was here that he and I discussed that would have guaranteed funding up to 43% of the county college budget from the state, but they had a catchphrase in there, subject to available funding. So, of course, there was never available funding, so the funding from the state really dwindled. CCM always got pretty good support from the county, and we go through a particular process that establishes the county contribution. So, fast forward to the present day. Right now, CCM gets about 10% of our funding, maybe 11% from the state, about 20% from the county. And so the bulk, so we don't even get 1/3 from the 2 of those combined. So the students are paying basically 2/3 of the operating cost of the college, which is much higher than we would like. Even though we're still very affordable, it's still difficult for some students to even accomplish a minor tuition increase. So when Governor Whitman was in office, she did a number of things, not the least of which was to abolish the Department of Higher Education and replace it with a President's Council and a Commission of Higher Education, which we'll probably get into a little bit later. But the other thing she did was she had been a trustee at Somerset County College before it was Raritan Valley, and had great confidence in local boards and their ability to make important decisions. And so when she was governor, she pledged to increase state funding to the community colleges up to 1/3 over time, with the understanding that the colleges would basically freeze tuition for that same period of time, which many of us did. In fact, CCM did even longer than required. We got some increased state funding, but then again, things started going south again to a point now where we're getting about 10 or 11% from the state and about 20% from the county.
Yeah, and I know you have been conscious of that if there has to be an increase to try to manage it and be creative and to try to not have it just sit solely on the students. I know I've heard you say that before.
Absolutely. And we look at tuition, we also look at fees, and we also look at how we fit in comparison to other community colleges across the state of New Jersey. So we're certainly not the highest, we're not the lowest, we're probably someplace in the middle in terms of tuition, and also in terms of fees we were a little bit lower than the middle, but we're getting closer to the middle now.
Of course, a challenge for any college is also to have students in the seats and enrollment issues and such. And CCM is sort of with this national conversation about looking at higher education. How have enrollment trends sort of gone at the college?
Well, as I mentioned earlier in the first part of this interview, we reached our peak enrollment in 1982. In addition to everything else that was going on, the unemployment rate at that time was over 10%. We were in the middle of a very bad depression at that time. The unemployment rate has fluctuated a lot. It's started to go down again now, but we were dealing with a population, I think, particularly of women, whose education had been interrupted, and so they were coming here, and that's why we had so many part-time students, primarily female students, in the middle 80s. So again, this is pretty comparable to what's going on across the country. Community colleges generally are seeing an increase in the number of traditional age students coming right out of high school, and a decline in the so-called non-traditional students who are, let's say, between the mid-20s, 30, 40, 50 years old, and so forth. So our marketing efforts now will focus not only on the traditional students, which we work very hard at, but also on the non-traditional students as well.
And I imagine CCM tries to have a connection with local high schools and academies to just have our name inserted with the many other options that are out there.
Absolutely. Our admissions office, and again, in an earlier life, I was a director of admissions at Adelphi. I worked a lot in admissions at Harper College for years, so made a lot of high school visits in my career. But our admissions staff does visit high schools on a regular basis, all of the local high schools in Morris County, and some high schools that are out of county, if we're invited by those high schools to visit them, because we do try to respect the borders of our service area, which would be Morris County. And again, what I didn't say in the first part of this interview was in 1982, in addition to unemployment rates and other things, there were no community colleges in Sussex or Warren County in 1982. So all the students from those counties who wanted to go to a community college really had to come here. And their counties had to pay us chargeback for the students that were coming here from their counties, as opposed to a direct contribution. So when they formed their community colleges, a lot of that enrollment went away, although we still get quite a few students from both Sussex and Warren County, as well as Essex and Passaic counties.
Sure. You had mentioned the New Jersey President's Council as well. Could you describe this organization, this body, and what your contributions have been?
Well, when Governor Whitman abolished the Department of Higher Education, I still remember very clearly the day that she made that announcement. She invited all the presidents to come to the governor's office, and we all went, and she announced that she was not going to be providing funding for the Department of Higher Education in the budget she was going to announce that night. And that's when the chancellor found out that there was no more Department of Higher Education. But she established a study commission to look at alternate strategies for governance of higher education, with less emphasis on regulation and more emphasis on advocacy and coordination. And so the study commission included 4 college presidents, which included the president of Princeton University, at the time was Peter Shapiro. The president of Rutgers at the time was Francis Lawrence. The president of Thomas Edison College, which is and was George Pruitt, and the president of Brookdale Community College, Peter Burnham. So the 4 of them worked with some public members, and they devised this President's Council. Legislation was developed and passed, which created the President's Council, which includes representation of presidents from all the public and independent colleges and universities in the state of New Jersey. And lately it's been modified to include proprietary institutions as well. So the President's Council, part of the design was that the chairmanship of the President's Council would rotate among the sectors, and each sector would hold office for 2 years. And so Peter Burnham was the first community college president to be elected as chairman of the President's Council, and I was the second community college president to be elected as chairman of the President's Council. In between, there were presidents of other colleges, independent and four-year colleges as well, who chaired the council over the years.
So really a unique part of your job here at CCM is to be that ambassador for us at a much higher level, to have us inserted into conversations where big policy might happen.
Absolutely. And in fact, before I would chair the President's Council, I also chaired the Academic Affairs Committee of the President's Council, which is the body that reviews all new program proposals that come from all institutions and then makes recommendations to the full President's Council. I also chaired the Transfer Committee before I became chair of the group.
Yeah. And on the very important issue of transfer as well, I know that the President's Council was involved with a pretty important initiative for our students that continues to this day with a statewide transfer agreement. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Well, that was a very interesting and exciting possibility because my chairmanship of the President's Council happened to coincide with Pam Lampett, Assemblywoman Lampett from Camden County, who was chairing the Higher Education Committee. And she was very, very dedicated to improving transfer between four-year colleges and two-year colleges. I think her focus initially, of course, was more homegrown, more concerned about transfers from Camden County College to Rutgers and Camden and maybe Rowan University. There were some issues at both of those institutions at the time. So she was advocating for legislation that would mandate transfer. Many of us, myself included, were a little concerned about having legislation that mandated transfer. So what we were able to work with her on was to mandate that the President's Council would be responsible for developing a statewide transfer agreement. And so that would be the responsibility of the President's Council. She agreed to that. That legislation was then introduced and passed unanimously by both houses. And so then we went about the business of creating the transfer agreement. The president of Montclair University was very instrumental as well in developing that agreement. The agreement in the final analysis was that any student who completed a Bachelor of Arts, or I'm sorry, an Associate in Arts, Associate in Science degree would be able to transfer to a public four-year college or university as a junior and have all their general education requirements accepted as well. A very important concept, which meant then that the community colleges needed to make sure that we were all aligned with each other and with the four-year colleges in terms of general education, which we are, and so that's worked out pretty well. There's still some stories, some wrinkles in the blanket, if you will, but by and large, I think it's working quite well.
Absolutely. Today in 2016, many students are the beneficiaries of this agreement, so they're not wasting money or time. They really are working towards a four-year degree in some ways.
That's right. And what we try to stress is the importance for our students to complete the associate's degree so that they can take full advantage of this transfer agreement. Because if they do not complete that degree, then they're subject to a course-by-course evaluation and sometimes don't get credit for all the courses that they should at some institutions.
Absolutely. One process that students might not really know, or even members of the public, is the very sort of deep accreditation process that the college has to go through middle states. Could you describe this? I know it's a very important process to go through.
Well, it's a process that is important to go through. And I've had the opportunity to work at a couple of institutions where I've had some direct involvement in that. I've also chaired visiting teams to go to other community colleges and four-year colleges for that matter as well. But yes, every college or university is expected to go through a regional accreditation process. There are, I think, 4 different regional associations. The one that covers us is the Middle States Association, which Middle States includes New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Puerto Rico, of all things, and some overseas institutions as well. But every institution is required to do a self-study. It was done every 10 years. They've changed that now. It's going to be every 7 years, but for now, let's just say it's 10-year span. Self-study is done by the institution, shared with a visiting team. A visiting team comes to the campus, usually chaired by a president, and includes people from out of state, but from the Middle States region, who come and invest and study the self-study and look at specific criteria, specific standards that are established by the Middle States Association. I think there are now 7 standards. There were 14. There are now 7 standards that we all have to be concerned about. So it's a rigorous process. It's one that's taken very seriously. The primary purpose, I would suggest, is for improvement, for self-improvement. So it's expected that the college will find ways to improve itself, supported by a visiting team who may find other things that need improvement as well. But there should be no surprises at the end of the day in those recommendations that come forward.
Absolutely.
And then eventually the full commission will vote on the accreditation of a college. Recommendations could be full accreditation, could be a follow-up visit. It could go all the way up to show cause. I mean, there are institutions that have had to show cause and basically go out of business as a result of not getting fully accredited.
And CCM, thankfully, has done very well.
No, we've always done well.
Absolutely. And it's probably, there's a nice relief at the end of the process. It's so rigorous, but also a bit of a blueprint for the future on what you have to,
Absolutely.
the recommendations and such.
That's right. That's right. In fact, one of the early faculty members that I should have mentioned in our earlier discussion was Sarah Pfaffenroth. Sarah was a member of the English department, very distinguished member, great teacher, a very enthusiastic teacher. But she chaired our first 2 self-study reports here. She also chaired the search committee that selected me as the chief academic officer of CCM. So she was a very important part of this college for many, many years. She's since passed on, but was a wonderful teacher, a very enthusiastic teacher. I can still see her going into her classroom and closing the door with her foot as she went in, and she was teaching before she even got to the desk.
You had talked earlier about some of the connections at the state level with other presidents and the governor. Is there a part of your job that also sort of keeps tabs and maybe has conversations with legislators, state senators, or assembly persons, perhaps the Board of Chosen Freeholders at the county level?
Well, yes, we do work, of course, with the Board of Chosen Freeholders. As I mentioned before, they are instrumental in providing funding from the county to the college. There's an entity called the Board of School Estimate that includes 3 freeholders and 2 trustees, and we meet each year to establish the county contribution to the college. And we just met a couple of weeks ago to establish our budget for next year. And that's gone very well. So I meet with them on a pretty regular basis. I try to make sure that I go to a variety of public events where freeholders are present, as well as assemblymen and senators, state senators who represent parts of Morris County. Of course, Morris County is unique in that we have I think 5 or 6 different districts that have a piece of Morris County. So we do that. But we also have a Council of County Colleges, which is a body that's actually in the law as well, that's primarily the presidents and board chairs of each of the 19 community colleges, and we have an executive director, Dr. Larry Nespoli, that runs that organization. The council meets on a regular basis, so we get to meet with the presidents and board chairs of other colleges, but the presidents themselves meet usually every other month or so, and we usually meet in Trenton. So we work together in a variety of issues as well. But yes, and then finally the Council of County Colleges does organize a number of events to advocate for better funding for community colleges. So we just had a student lobbying day a couple of weeks ago. We sent 4 students, as did most of the other community colleges. They try to set up meetings with the legislators, which our people were able to do. There's a Phi Theta Kappa Day, which is coming up in a couple of weeks, where we'll take a couple of Phi Theta Kappa students from our institution and from the other 19. Again, we'll meet with legislators, so we're very present and very visible in the State House on those days.
One of our final topics to talk about are also the many agreements and partnerships that CCM has built over the years with sister institutions in the state, articulation agreements and transfer agreements. Again, there's so many, we can't probably name them all, but
Right.
Are there a few that you sort of stand out as highlights over the years?
Well, we've always had great relationships, particularly with the colleges that are closest to us geographically, because they are, in fact, the colleges that are most popular among our graduates. They want to go to those institutions for the same reasons that they want to come here. So places like William Patterson, Montclair State, College of St. Elizabeth, Fairleigh Dickinson University, Drew University, all those institutions, we have very fine relationships. And many of us thought at one point when we developed the statewide transfer agreement that we wouldn't have to have articulation agreements anymore, that they would be obsolete with this transfer agreement, but that's not the case. It turns out that particularly in some specialized areas, there's a great need for very clear transfer agreements, articulation agreements for students to see the path that they need to follow to get their baccalaureate degree and beyond. So St. Elizabeth's has always been a very strong institution for us. They've always held us in very high regard. Our nursing students, for example, are able to continue there to get their BSN, and they will give up to 90 credits toward 120 baccalaureate degree, BSN degree, for work that they do here at CCM. And likewise, Centenary College has a similar kind of agreement. William Patterson and Montclair, we have some very good relationships. Kane University, we've developed some new relationships, particularly in graphic design and the arts. And as a matter of fact, later today, we'll be signing a new agreement with the Blaustein School at Rutgers University, so which will enhance our already strong relationship with Rutgers. As I think you know, Rutgers, we have an agreement that permits Rutgers to actually have office space here on campus to facilitate students who want to transfer to Rutgers, and they also offer upper division courses, and eventually we hope and they hope they'll be able to offer full baccalaureate degrees here on this campus from Rutgers, so the students can start here and eventually earn a baccalaureate degree from Rutgers. It's still going to take a few years to build that, but that's the overall design.
Yeah, so our students on their first day at CCM, in their mind they can think they are a CCM student and they are on a longer path towards a bachelorate degree.
Absolutely, absolutely.
One actually topic we didn't mention, but maybe we could finish as one of our topics today, is you had a very unique experience where you were invited to Russia. Could you describe that? Because this is very unique. I remember hearing about it.
Well, it was very unique and very exciting. I don't even remember how I heard about it, but I did hear that there was a program called the Community College Administrators Program in Russia, run through the Fulbright program, Institute for International Education. So I applied for it. It was something that I was very interested in for a lot of different reasons. For one thing, I've always had a strong interest in international education. Probably going back to days when I was in high school, when I was an exchange student in Berlin as a junior in high school. But I did apply for this and was selected. There were 4 of us altogether from different community colleges across the country. The president of Broward College, David Armstrong, was part of the group, myself, Adelina Silva from Alamo College in Texas. There was somebody from California and somebody from Minnesota. So we met and we spent 2 weeks in Russia. We spent most of that time in Moscow, but we also spent a lot of time in Kazan and some other smaller villages outside of Kazan and so forth. So we visited a variety of institutions. I think we probably visited maybe 10 or 12 different colleges and universities of different types. There was nothing that was really quite like the community college. The last institution we visited was most like a community college, but the rest of them not so much. So we visited, they have a very, unique system. They have a federal university system, a university system. The federal universities are probably the top tier. That's their Ivy League. And so we visited the Federal University of Kazan, which was once attended by Lenin and also by Tolstoy, neither of whom completed their degrees there. In fact, neither of them lasted very long there for different reasons. But even though Lenin never graduated, they still have a big statue of him out in front of the major courtyard.
Wow. Wow. Fascinating stuff.
Yes.
I guess to finish, if we could maybe just now put everything into perspective, you've been a very busy man. A lot of accomplishments here, a lot of networking with the state, with the county, with the students and faculty and staff members here. I'm curious, are your family and friends happy to have some more time with you now after retirement?
Well, I'm probably not the right person to ask that question. But so I will look forward to that. But yes, I do have children and grandchildren that I look forward to spending time with.
Will it be difficult to say goodbye?
To be honest, I haven't really thought about it that much. It probably will be, but not there yet. I still have a couple of months to keep stirring up the pot and enjoying life as I know it.
I wish you the best of luck in these final months, and certainly congratulations on the pending retirement.
Okay, thank you very much, John.
Thank you, Dr. Yaw.
Okay, thanks.